Okay, so I wanted to address something that has been a little bit of a topic of discussion recently, spurred on by Nicola Coughlin's recent appearance on the Graham Norton show. She was discussing the fact that Bridgerton had considered doing a certain type of intimate scene, but found no way to make it beautiful. And she references Daniel Craig's new film, Queer.
There's a scene in it, which I will talk around because I can't say what's happening. It's an intimate scene, and there's an action happening in the scene that I joked we couldn't do that in Bridgerton because you can't make that beautiful, but Queer made it really beautiful.
So, of course, as the investigative journalist and reporter that I am, I did my due diligence and immediately went and saw Queer. Now, was I going to see Queer regardless because I'm a film person? Well, yes, but I was illuminated by seeing the film because I had certain sneaking suspicions as to what she might be referring to, and those suspicions were confirmed. They were confirmed. Now, why did I have certain suspicions? Well, there's not much that we haven't seen as far as intimate scenes go in the Bridgerverse. And also, there is something in particular that comes to mind that just doesn't exactly jive well with the genre. Not always, at least. It's not in the niche that they've really carved out. You think about romance novels that these are based on, the audience is predominantly women, so it's catering to women, catering to female pleasure, to the female gaze. And as you think about that, there is obviously something that comes to mind where it's like, well, wait, that can take a backseat. That can take a backseat. And I just want to talk about this, because I would have to disagree that this cannot be done in an artful or beautiful way on Bridgerton. It was done in an artful and beautiful way in Queer, by the way. And I would like to give my input. I would like to give my 2 cents on this phenomenon coming up, going forward in the series. Now, generally speaking, I have mixed thoughts. As far as media consumption goes, I could really leave it or take it, and most often could leave it. I just don't really care. I'm just like, boring, not interested. So sorry that everything has been so man-centric forever that I just really don't care. And also something about it feels a little anti-feminist to me. Not actually, but a little bit. And so I just don't really care to see it. It's not something that I'm chomping at the bit to see, that's for sure. And if it comes up in romance novels that I read, I just am kind of like, okay. Like, no one moved. Unless it's done in a very specific way, under a very specific set of circumstances. And this cannot and does not work for a majority of circumstances and couples, for that matter, in Bridgerton. But there's one that comes to mind that it absolutely does work for. So let's break that down. Now, season 1, Daphne and the Duke? Absolutely not. I would literally send someone to jail if I had to see that, if I was subjected to that. The problem here is that there's a gender dynamic. So we're talking about a heterosexual dynamic, obviously. Queer, it's different because that's 2 men. Any type of queer project between 2 men or 2 women, the gender dynamic is completely different. So that's not something that you have to consider. But Bridgerton talks a lot about gender dynamics and the disenfranchisement of women and the lack of autonomy and power and knowledge that they had during this time and in this society. So that's a very important part of it. And there is inherently an imbalanced power dynamic between pretty much every one of the couples. There just is. Especially when it comes to sex or sexual liberation. All the men are experienced, all the men know what it is. Meanwhile, the girlies don't know a single thing. Couldn't tell them a single, like they literally have had no basic sexual education whatsoever. So that presents a really tricky dynamic here. Which is why it lends itself more to seeing the woman be the beneficiary. It just does. It just does. I'm sorry if that offends you. It's just the truth. It just does. It just sits better. It just goes down better. Okay? So Daphne and the Duke, Daphne literally 5 seconds ago learned what a penis was. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that poor girl do that. I don't want to see it. Next. As far as Kate and Anthony go, they are on more of a level playing field. Enemies to lovers as a dynamic, one of the things that I like about it, trope-wise, is that this is terrible. The man has to inherently view the woman with worth and respect in order to consider her a foe. in the first place. So there is more of a level playing field here, and they didn't play up her being a virgin or like not knowing anything as much, although it was kind of implied that she didn't really have experience, but it did seem like she was a little bit more knowledgeable. So that could have worked. It could have worked, although still, I don't know. The first season that they had, season 2, I don't know. It's sticky territory. It also just makes sense for their characters for Antony to be the giver. It just does. I don't know what to tell you. The how deep is your love scene, it makes canonical sense. It checks out. He's obsessed with her. It's like everything. And then we see it again in season 3, and I'm just like, well, yeah, exactly. Likely place for him to be. Likely thing for him to be doing, of course. Of course. That just makes sense for them. What can I say? But, however, I would not be opposed to seeing any type of Anthony scene in the future whatsoever, but I certainly would not be opposed to seeing this dynamic between the two of them in the future. Now that they're married, now that she is more knowledgeable, now that they're on an even more level playing field, this can and could work for Kate and Antony. But again, I think what they have done just makes sense. It's just like, well, yes. Well, yes, Antony's a muncher. Like, what can I say? That just checks out. And then we get to Colin and Penelope. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about Colin and Penelope. Well, there's a lot of things about Colin and Penelope. And again, I don't know how many times I have to say it. I know that my videos might suggest otherwise. They're not even my favorite couple. But they are, however, the couple that this makes the most sense for and would work the best for. And let me tell you why. Let me break down why that is. That's because there is a difference in power dynamic because of the Lady Whistledown of it all, okay? In a lot of ways, Pen actually has the upper hand, has the edge on certain power, on certain autonomy, on certain influence over Colin. That's like a big conflict that goes between them. He's all jealous and he feels insecure. He feels emasculated. So that right there already, she's more worldly, she knows a little bit more, she has a little bit more freedom, a little bit more autonomy, although they did still, like, make her a, like, I don't know what to do virgin, but they also did lean into her being like, well, tell me what to do. And no, tell me, and I'll do it. So she obviously has a much more, obviously, vested interest in being an active participant. That's something that they really hammered home with Pen. And that also makes sense because she's been obsessed with him since she was a child. So when you have this dynamic where you've seen Penelope just like goo goo gaga over him for all these seasons, this would check out. It just would check out. What can I say? And I said a similar thing where Colin had the dream about Penelope. And it makes sense that Colin was the one to have that dream about Penelope because they had a connection, they had an intimacy, they had a love for each other. But at least on Colin's part, that was not a sexual or romantic love. So it's important that in season 3, that is portrayed really keenly, which is why Colin had to be the one to have those kind of sexual fantasies and dreams about Penelope to indicate that his mind is kind of changing and he's seeing her in a different light and he's looking at her a little bit differently and to establish that he has those feelings and those desires for her. So that needed to happen. And also, it just is delicious and rewarding because we've already seen 2 seasons of Penelope be just all over this man. I'm like, I don't need to see Penelope having a dream about Colin. I know she dreams about him every single night. I know she wants him so bad. Like, it's almost embarrassing how bad she wants him. So I need to see him want her in the same fashion. Which is what they were doing in season 3. So then once they're finally on an even playing field as far as wanting each other, and he's desperate, that's where it kind of changes. And what can I say? I mean, Luke Newton's performance, blame him. Okay, I didn't do this. I'm not responsible for this. But the way that he played those intimate scenes, I mean, desperate, pathetic, on his knees, literally and figuratively in every single way. So why not get him on his knees physically? You know what I mean? He's so in awe, he's so obsessed, he can't even function properly. And she loves that, and I love to see it. And I love to see him be so goo goo gaga over her, because the tables have turned. So we like to see this. We like to see the power shift here. We like to see her kind of have the upper hand, which is another reason why in their last intimate scene, you know, she is the initiator. She is the aggressor. And again, I haven't talked about this episode yet, but Luke Newton, the performance, just the face the way he's looking at her, I'm just like, oh, okay. So, I see the vision so clearly, and it makes so much sense. And it just works for them. It just works for all these dynamics, them being friends to lovers, them knowing each other their entire life, so they're kind of on this level playing field where they've known each other and they've seen each other grow up. There's not that big of an age difference. Now there's not a big gap in knowledge or understanding. The way that he has taught her has not been condescending, or like he's not really a rake to begin with. It just would be so delicious for them. Of course, if the actors were amenable, okay? I don't want to see anything that anybody doesn't want to do, but come on now. The way that Nicola was saying it, I was like, she's been advocating for it, and you know what? I'll join her in her advocacy. I will advocate for this. I'm picturing, I'm sensing, I'm seeing, perhaps set to a classical cover of Espresso. Come and get this pollen vibe. Season 4, episode 1. Maybe we go to Pen at her desk. Maybe she's writing a whistle down. You know, she's a working woman after all. Maybe someone comes in, she's acting a little strangely. I don't know what's going on. And then we cut away, and then Colin comes out from under the desk. There are ways to do this that are not gross. Because I also did find it a little weird that we didn't see Colin being a giver to Penelope in that particular way when we have seen all the main women, Daphne, Kate, and Queen Charlotte, receive in that way. I thought that was a little strange, but again, I thought maybe that's a little bit of a power dynamic, and also I don't really need to see it to know that I just know he's obsessed with her. I know that all of them are obsessed with them, but like, it just works differently for them. What can I say? So I'm seeing that, and then I'm seeing in the same montage, perhaps the tables are turned. And again, this doesn't have to be grotesque. We don't have to be nasty about it, okay? And again, I don't really want to be nasty about it, but why don't we focus on his expression? Why don't we focus on his reaction? Maybe a little hand in hair shot. Okay, this can be done beautifully. This can be done artfully. This can be done cinematically. Okay? We just need the suggestion. We just need the hint. But yeah, I would like to see it. And it also just makes sense for Penelope as a character. It just makes sense. What can I say? I also think that there is an element to it where, like, there's something about it that doesn't sit right in my spirit when I think about, like, the man suggesting it. This seems like the type of thing that Colin would never suggest, but Penelope would discover on her own and be like, I'm doing this, and he'd be like, wait, what? And then his socks would be knocked off. You know? That's just what it seems like to me. It just works for their characters, it works for their dynamics, what can I say? Now, we move on to other couples. As much as Benedict and Sophie are one of my favorite couples, certainly don't want to see that in their season. I'm sorry. Not only do we have the rake of the century, truly, and the virgin of a lifetime, but now we have employer. No. Get out. I don't want to see that. Not in their season, at least. Not until they're married, at least. So I don't want to see that. That doesn't work. I suppose it could work for Philip and Eloise because he is much more, like, kind of submissive. She's more outward. She likes to have more control, more autonomy. She's talked about it. You could spin it in a feminist angle, which I don't love, generally speaking, because I'm like, is sucking dick feminist? I don't know. I don't know that I want to put that out into the world, but if they wanted to, they could do it in that sort of a way. But I don't know that that would really make sense until, honestly, none of this really makes sense until they're, like, actually both married, any of these couples. And then Francesca and Michaela, obviously not applicable, and then Gregory and Hyacinth are so far down the line, but I don't really think it would work with them either, because it's the same thing. They're gonna have the same dynamic of experienced man and inexperienced woman. And that just doesn't sit right in my spirit. You know what I mean? So, with their particular dynamic, I would like to see it. I would like to see it in season 4. Thank you. I would like to see it. What can I say? I would like to see a lot of things. But there's a lot of ways you could do that very beautifully, and in a, like, serious way. This is all jokes. This is all, shits and gigs. But in a serious way, there is a way that that can be done artfully and beautifully and show a connection and show his kind of reverence for her and show her own autonomy and her taking control of her sexuality and sensuality and being an aggressor and exploring. There's a lot of ways that that can be done very beautifully. So I would have to disagree with Miss Nicola that this cannot be done artfully, because it absolutely can. It can be done very beautifully. I see the vision so clearly. Does anybody else? Does anybody else know what I'm talking about? Because, come on now. Anyway, that's just my bid. That's just my plea. I put that forth. Again, I am available for showrunner. I am available for any position. But yeah, I would like to see it. I would like to see it. And I would like to see it for Kate and Anthony, too. But Colin and Penelope, it's just the sort of thing that is very unique and specific, where it works for them. It works for their history, it works for their dynamic, it works for their individual characterization as individuals, as well as once they're a couple coming together. And I also just think it makes sense. You know what I mean? I'm just like, Penelope would be all over that. Let's be real. Let's be real. Anyway, so let me know what you think about this. But yeah, I just thought that was very interesting when she mentioned that, and I was like, so where's the footage? Do we have a script? Because I'll write it. I'll do it for the greater good. I'll take one for the team and make this happen. But they should make it happen. They absolutely should. Thank you. I'll see you for Bridgerton Needs. I'm joking. Mostly.